Cold steel bit into the wrists of a man who had survived tours in the Helmand province. Yet nothing had prepared Lieutenant Colonel Darius Hayes for the humiliation currently unfolding on the polished marble floors of the Grandview shopping center. He did not struggle. He did not scream. He simply stood tall in his dress blues, the medals on his chest glinting under the atrium lights, while Officer Ronan Blaine shoved him forward, grinning as if he had just captured a fugitive on the FBI's most wanted list. Bystanders gasped, raising their phones to record a colossal error in judgment that would soon bring the full weight of the Pentagon crashing down on a small-town police department. Justice was coming, and it would be absolute. The air inside the Grandview shopping center smelled of cinnamon pretzels and expensive perfume, a sharp contrast to the diesel and dust Darius Hayes had been breathing. He adjusted his cover, checking his reflection in the glass window of a jewelry store. Lieutenant Colonel Darius Hayes was a man of precision. He had climbed the ranks of the United States Marine Corps, not through connections, but through sheer grit and a tactical brilliance that had earned him the Navy Cross. But today, the only mission objective he cared about was getting a stuffed bear, specifically a limited edition Sergeant Cuddles Build-A-Bear for his daughter, Naya, who was turning 6. He had come straight from the base after a debriefing. He hadn't even had time to change out of his dress blues. Usually, he avoided wearing the uniform in public off base to avoid drawing attention, but he was running late, and Nia had been begging for this specific toy. "Focus, Darius," he muttered to himself, smoothing the front of his jacket. The mall was crowded. As he walked towards the toy store, he noticed the eyes on him. In a military town, a uniform was background noise, but here in Oak Haven, an affluent suburb north of the nearest base, he stuck out. He offered a polite nod to an elderly couple who stared a little too long. They didn't smile back. Darius ignored it. He was used to the stares. Sometimes they were admiration, sometimes curiosity, and sometimes, though he hated to admit it, suspicion. He reached the toy store, Build-A-Wonder, and stepped inside. The bright colors and screaming children were a sensory overload compared to the quiet hum of the tactical operations center he had just left. "Can I help you, sir?" a young woman behind the counter asked. Her name tag read Jessica. She looked at his uniform with wide eyes. "Yes, ma'am," Darius said, his voice a deep, calm baritone. "I'm looking for the military bear. The one with the camouflage vest. I called ahead yesterday to reserve it under Hayes." Jessica tapped on her screen. "Oh, the Sergeant Cuddles. Yes, we held the last one for you. Let me grab it from the back." While she disappeared, Darius leaned against the counter, checking his watch. If he hurried, he could make it to Nia's school before the final bell. He wanted to surprise her. "Excuse me?" The voice was nasally and sharp, cutting through the store's cheerful music. Darius turned. Standing feet away was a security guard. No, not a security guard. A police officer. The patch on his shoulder identified him as Oak Haven Police, but his stance suggested he thought he was patrolling the streets of Fallujah. He was shorter than Darius, stocky with a buzz cut that was trying too hard, and a uniform that looked a size too tight. His name tag read, Blaine. "Can I help you, officer?" Darius asked pleasantly. Officer Ronan Blaine didn't smile. His thumbs were hooked into his duty belt, hovering near his taser. He looked Darius up and down, his eyes lingering on the ribbons stacked on Darius's chest. "We've had some reports," Blaine said, his voice loud enough that several shoppers stopped to look. "Reports?" Darius frowned. "Shoplifting?" Blaine spat the word out. "Suspicious individual matching your description loitering around the jewelry store." Darius blinked. I stopped at the jewelry store window to check my reflection. I just walked in here. Blaine stepped closer, invading Darius's personal space. You got ID? I do, Darius said slowly. He knew the drill. Keep your hands visible. Move slowly. It's in my back pocket. I'm going to reach for it now. Don't bother, Blaine snapped. I know a fake when I see one. You think you're the first guy to come in here playing dress up to get a military discount. The accusation hung in the air. The store had gone silent. Jessica, the sales clerk, had returned with the bear and stood frozen, clutching it to her chest. Darius's jaw tightened. Officer, I am Lieutenant Colonel Darius Hayes of the United States Marine Corps. I am not asking for a discount. I am buying a toy for my daughter. Lieutenant Colonel, huh? Blaine laughed, a harsh barking sound. You look pretty young for a colonel, and that uniform, it's a mess. Your ribbons are out of order. They weren't. Darius had inspected them himself that morning. He knew regulations better than he knew his own social security number. My uniform is within regulation, Darius said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm completing a transaction. He turned back to the counter, dismissing the officer. It was a calculated move, a command move. It was the wrong move. Don't you turn your back on me, Blaine roared. Before Darius could process the aggression, a heavy hand clamped onto his shoulder and spun him around. Darius's training kicked in instantly. Assess, adapt, overcome. His instinct was to neutralize the threat. He could have dislocated Blaine's wrist and had him on the floor in under seconds, but he wasn't in a war zone. He was in a toy store in suburban America. Retaliation would end his career. He raised his hands slowly, palms open. Officer, remove your hand. I said, show me ID, Blaine shouted, his face reddening. He was playing to the audience now. A small crowd had gathered at the entrance of the store. Phones were already out. I offered to show you my ID, Darius said calmly, though his heart hammered against his ribs. You refused to look at it. I want to see your military ID and your driver's license and a receipt for that uniform, Blaine demanded. A receipt for my uniform? Darius looked at the man in disbelief. I was issued this uniform by the government officer. I don't carry a receipt for it. Stolen valor, Blaine announced to the room, pointing a finger in Darius's face. That's a federal crime, buddy. Impersonating an officer. I bet you bought those medals at a pawn shop. This is ridiculous, Jessica squeaked from behind the counter. He reserved the bear. He's a customer. Stay out of this, miss, Blaine barked. He turned back to Darius. You're coming with me. Am I under arrest? Darius asked. You're detained for suspicion of theft and fraud. On what grounds? You have no probable cause? I am the probable cause. Blaine grabbed Darius's left wrist, twisting it behind his back. Darius pulled his arm back firmly. Do not touch me. The atmosphere in the room shattered. Blaine pulled his taser. Get on the ground now, get on the ground. Darius stared at the yellow weapon pointed at his chest. He thought of Naya. If he got tased, he'd miss her birthday. If he fought back, he'd go to the brig. I will not get on the ground, Darius said, his voice like granite. I have done nothing wrong. I am a senior field-grade officer. You are making a mistake that you cannot undo. Last warning, Blaine screamed. Officer Blaine, is it? A new voice entered the fray. A tall man in a suit, the mall manager, pushed through the crowd. What is going on here? I've got a suspect refusing to comply, Blaine said, not lowering the taser. Stolen Valor shoplifting. I did not shoplift, Darius said to the manager. I walked in, asked for my reserved item, and this officer accosted me. Fits the description, Blaine lied. Black male, 6 foot, wearing a jacket. Darius raised an eyebrow. I'm wearing a dress blue alpha blouse, not a jacket. Same difference. Blaine sneered. Turn around, hands behind your back. Mr. Novak, Darius said to the manager, I suggest you check your security cameras before your officer here does something that will bankrupt this establishment. Blaine didn't wait for the manager to answer. He holstered the taser and lunged. He kicked Darius's legs apart, a sweep that would have toppled a lesser man. Darius stumbled, but caught himself. Stop resisting, Blaine screamed, grappling with Darius's arm. Darius allowed it. He let himself be turned. He felt the cold metal of the handcuffs click onto his right wrist, then his left. He felt the pinch of the skin. You are making a grave mistake, Darius whispered, his face pressed against a rack of My Little Pony plushies. Shut up. You have the right to remain silent, Blaine recited, yanking Darius upright. He shoved him toward the door. As they exited the store, the mall atrium was silent. Hundreds of eyes watched. Darius kept his head high. He looked straight ahead, locking eyes with a teenager filming on an iPhone. Record it, Darius thought. Record every second. They didn't take him to the police station immediately. Blaine marched him to the mall's security holding office, a small, windowless concrete room in the bowels of the building near the loading docks. Blaine shoved Darius into a metal chair. The handcuffs were tight, cutting off circulation. Comfortable, Colonel? Blaine mocked, leaning against the door frame. He took out his radio. Dispatch, I got the 1016 in custody. Bringing him in shortly, just processing the scene. He looked at Darius with a smug satisfaction. You know, guys like you make me sick. My brother served. Real heroes serve, not clowns in costumes. Darius sat perfectly still. What is your brother's name? Blaine blinked. What? Your brother? You said he served. What unit? What name? Private First Class Declan Blaine, 1st Armored. Not that it's any of your business. Darius filed the name away. And you honor him by harassing a superior officer. Shut your mouth, Blaine slammed his hand on the table. The doubt was gnawing at him. So he buried it under anger. I know a scam when I see one. You've got a fake ID, a fake uniform, and a fake accomplice on the phone. You're going down for this. I'm going to make sure of it. Blaine grabbed his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I have the suspect in custody requesting transport to the station and get the chief on the line. Tell him we have a high-profile stolen Valor case. I want to book him before the media gets wind of it. Copy that. 4 Alpha, transport is out, Blaine ordered, ignoring him. He grabbed Darius by the bicep and hauled him to his feet. We're doing this by the book, public exit. I want everyone to see what happens to fakes. They marched out of the holding room, back into the service corridor, and then burst out into the main atrium of the mall. The scene had changed. There had been a few curious onlookers. Now there was a wall of people. The teenager with the iPhone had done his job well. The video of the initial takedown had already hit Twitter and TikTok with the caption, Oak Haven PD arrests Marine hero WTH. As Blaine pushed Darius towards the exit, the crowd surged forward. Why is he in cuffs? A woman shouted. Check his ID, a man in a construction vest yelled. He's got a Navy Cross. You don't buy that at Walmart. Blaine felt the sweat trickling down his back. The hostility in the air was palpable. He tightened his grip on Darius's arm, trying to look authoritative. Back up, everyone. Back up. This is an active police investigation, Blaine shouted, his voice cracking slightly. Officer, Darius said quietly so only Blaine could hear. Look at the upper level. Blaine glanced up. Lining the railing of the second floor were dozens of phones, all pointed down at them. Flashlights beamed like spotlights. "You are parading a senior military officer in handcuffs through a public venue," Darius noted. "This is a defamation lawsuit, a civil rights violation. And is that a local news crew?" It was. A cameraman with a heavy shoulder rig was sprinting toward the automatic doors, a reporter with a microphone trailing behind him. It was Channel 8 News, the local affiliate. They must have been nearby covering the grand opening of the new bakery. "Get him in the car," Blaine muttered to himself. "Just get him in the car." They reached the curb just as a black and white cruiser screeched to a halt. A second officer, younger and looking terrified by the crowd, jumped out to open the back door. "Get in!" Blaine shoved Darius. Darius stopped. He planted his feet. He turned his head to the crowd, found the Channel 8 camera, and looked directly into the lens. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The image of a black man in a pristine Marine Corps uniform, handcuffed behind his back, flanked by a sweating, aggressive police officer, was beamed live to thousands of homes in the tri-state area. Then, with dignity, Darius ducked his head and entered the police car. Blaine slammed the door. "Go." He slapped the roof. "Get him to the station. I'll follow in my unit." As the cruiser pulled away, Blaine adjusted his belt, trying to look like a hero. But the crowd wasn't clapping. They were booing. For the first time, Officer Blaine wondered if the voice on the phone had been real. But it was too late to turn back now. He had to double down. He had to prove the uniform was fake. His life depended on it. The Oak Haven police station was a brick building that looked more like a post office than a fortress of justice. Inside, the air was stale, smelling of old coffee and floor wax. Darius sat in the interrogation room. Room B. They had removed his handcuffs finally, but only so he could be fingerprinted. He had refused to sign the fingerprint card. He had refused to sign the rights waiver. He had sat in silence, staring at the two-way mirror. In the observation room on the other side of the glass, Chief of Police Harlan Novak stared at Officer Blaine. Chief Novak was a large man with a red face and a white mustache. He was away from retirement and hated complications. This was a complication. "Let me get this straight," Novak said, his voice low and dangerous. "You arrested a lieutenant colonel." "He's a fake, Chief," Blaine insisted, though his voice lacked the confidence it had. He was pacing the small room, wiping sweat from his forehead. His ID looked weird. The lamination was too thick, and he was loitering. Loitering at a Build-A-Bear, Novak rubbed his temples. "Greg, please tell me you have more than that." He was arrogant, resisted arrest. "Did he swing at you?" "No." "Did he run?" "No, but he wouldn't get on the ground." Novak sighed. He looked through the glass at Darius. The man was sitting with his hands folded on the table. He looked calm. Too calm. Real criminals were jittery. They yelled. They cried. They asked for cigarettes. This man looked like he was waiting for a bus. "And you said he made a call?" Novak asked. "Yeah, called some guy named Lang. Claimed he was Pentagon. Threatened to call the FBI. Novak froze. "Lang?" "Yeah, Tariq Lang said he was a colonel." Novak's face lost its color. He walked over to the small desk in the corner of the observation room and opened his laptop. He typed into the search bar, "Colonel Tariq Lang, Pentagon." The first result was a .gov website, biography. Colonel Tariq J. Lang, Senior Legal Advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Novak clicked the image. A stern face stared back. "Is this the voice you heard?" Novak asked, pointing at the screen. I don't know, Chief. It was just a voice." "Greg?" Novak stood up, his knees popping. "You idiot, man." "Chief, if this is real," Novak pointed at Darius through the glass, "we have kidnapped a high-ranking federal officer." "But the ID?" Blaine stammered. "Shut up about the ID," Novak roared. "Bring me the evidence bag, the one with his wallet." Blaine ran out and returned with a plastic bag. Novak ripped it open. He took out the CAC card. He pulled a specialized card reader from his drawer, a device they used for scanning federal IDs during joint task force operations, something they rarely used. He slotted the card in. The computer screen flashed green. Valid clearance, top secret, SCI, name, Hayes Darius, rank 05, Lieutenant Colonel, status active duty. Novak stared at the screen. He felt like he was going to vomit. "He's real," Novak whispered. Blaine looked at the screen. The blood drained from his face until he looked like a ghost. "Oh, God. You didn't just arrest a Marine," Novak said, turning to his officer with eyes full of fury. "You arrested a ghost. Top secret clearance. Do you know what that means? It means this guy has phone numbers that go straight to the White House." "What do we do?" Blaine asked, his voice trembling. "Do we release him? We can't just kick him out the door." Novak paced. "We booked him. It's in the system. The media is already outside. If we release him now with a sorry, they'll eat us alive. We need a strategy. We need to spin this." "Spin it," we say. We say the ID looked tampered with. We say we were verifying due to high alerts of terrorism. We have a situation. "I know about the media, Cindy." "No, Chief, not the media. We just got a call from the Air National Guard base in West Haven. They are scrambling a Provost Marshal unit." "For what?" "For us, Chief. And sir, state troopers are blocking off the street." Novak dropped the phone. He walked to the window of his office, which overlooked the front parking lot. The scene outside was chaotic. News vans were setting up satellite dishes. A crowd of protesters had already gathered holding makeshift signs. But that wasn't what stopped Novak's heart. Rolling down Main Street, bypassing the traffic, were two black SUVs with tinted windows and U.S. government plates. Behind them was a Humvee. They weren't local PD. They weren't state troopers. "Who's that?" Blaine asked, peeking through the blinds. The lead SUV stopped right in front of the precinct steps. The doors opened. 4 men in dark suits stepped out. They moved with a synchronized, fluid lethality. Following them was a woman in a Navy dress uniform, a Judge Advocate General, JAG officer. Novak recognized the lead man in the suit. He didn't know the name, but he knew the type. NCIS, or maybe something deeper. "Blaine," Novak said, adjusting his tie with shaking hands. "Go down there. Bring Colonel Hayes up to my office. Remove the cuffs. Offer him coffee. Offer him whatever he wants." "Where are you going?" "I'm going to go greet the wolves," Novak said grimly. "And I'm going to pray they don't eat me first." Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Darius sat with his eyes closed. He wasn't sleeping. He was counting. He knew Tariq. Tariq Lang didn't do half measures. If Darius called and said he was in trouble, Tariq would send the cavalry. The door to the interrogation room burst open. It wasn't Blaine. It was a man in a sharp gray suit. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like a lawyer who cost $1,000 an hour. "Lieutenant Colonel Hayes," the man asked. Darius opened his eyes. "Who are you?" "My name is Special Agent Caden." "Excuse me, Special Agent Voss," the man corrected himself quickly. "Naval Criminal Investigative Service. I'm here to escort you out." "Am I free to go?" Darius asked. "Sir, at this point, you own this building," the agent said with a grim smile. "But there's a complication. Your wife is outside." Darius's calm facade finally cracked. Ilara is here. She saw the news. She's with the press and she is very upset. Darius stood up. Get me my cover. I'm not leaving without my uniform being correct. The agent nodded. Your cover is being retrieved from the evidence locker as we speak. Sir, on behalf of the Department of the Navy, I apologize for this indignity. Don't apologize to me, Agent, Darius said. Save it for the police chief. He's going to need it. Darius walked out of the room, the agent trailing him. They walked through the bullpen. Every police officer in the room stopped working. They stared. They knew the silence was heavy, filled with the realization that they had messed with the wrong man. Blaine was standing by the chief's office door, holding Darius's white cover hat. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase. He held the hat out to Darius. His hands were shaking. Here you go, Blaine stammered. Darius took the hat. He inspected it for dirt. He brushed a speck of lint off the brim. He placed it squarely on his head, adjusting the angle with precision. He looked at Blaine. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. Officer, Darius said softly, you've dishonored your uniform. I hope the consequences teach you what training failed to. Darius turned and walked towards the front doors. The agent opened them. Flashbulbs erupted like gunfire. The roar of the crowd hit him. But Darius didn't look at the cameras. He looked for the woman in the yellow dress pushing through the police line. Darius! Ilara screamed, tears streaming down her face. He stepped out onto the precinct steps, a free man. But the war was just beginning. The SUVs were idling. The JAG officer was marching up the steps, briefcase in hand, ready to serve papers that would end careers. And in the distance, the low thump, thump, thump of a news helicopter grew louder. Oak Haven was about to become the center of the world. The parking lot of the Oak Haven Police Department had transformed into a carnival of flashing lights and shouting reporters. But inside the chief's office, the silence was suffocating. Chief Harlan Novak sat behind his desk, looking older than he had that morning. Standing across from him was not a local prosecutor, but Commander Quinn Mercer of the Judge Advocate General's Corps. She didn't sit. She stood with her briefcase open on the chair, arranging documents with terrifying precision. Officer Ronan Blaine stood in the corner, stripped of his duty belt, his gun, and his taser. He looked like a deflated balloon. The arrogance that had fueled him in the toy store had evaporated, replaced by a twitchy, sweating panic. Chief Novak, Commander Mercer began, her voice crisp. Do you know what a Section 1983 claim is? Novak rubbed his face. Civil action for deprivation of rights. Yes, Commander, I know. Good, because Colonel Hayes' legal team is filing one in federal court tomorrow morning, but that's the least of your worries. Mercer slid a document across the desk. This is a subpoena from the Department of Justice. They are opening an investigation into the Oak Haven Police Department for systemic profiling and harassment of military personnel. Systemic, Blaine blurted out. It was one stop. He looked suspicious. Mercer turned to Blaine. She didn't yell. She looked at him with the clinical detachment of a coroner examining a corpse. Officer Blaine, she said, we pulled your file. You have initiated stops. Of them were minorities. We're active duty military on leave. You have a pattern, and today you broke the camel's back. I was doing my job, Blaine insisted, though his voice wavered. He didn't show ID. We have the security footage from Build a Wonder. Mercer cut him off. NCIS seized the hard drives. The video clearly shows Colonel Hayes reaching for his wallet and you escalating the situation immediately. It shows you physically assaulting a senior officer who was offering no resistance. She turned back to Novak. The Pentagon takes the safety of its officers very seriously, Chief. When a local cop decides to play commando and assault a decorated Marine, it undermines the authority of the United States Armed Forces. We are making an example of you." "What do you want?" Novak whispered. "We want the body cam footage released unedited immediately," Mercer listed. "We want a public apology issued by the mayor, and we want Officer Blaine's badge." "You can't take my badge," Blaine stepped forward. "I have rights. The Union isn't going to touch this," Novak said, his voice heavy. He looked at his officer with disgust. "Ronan, I just got off the phone with the mayor. He saw the news. He saw the colonel in handcuffs. And you're fired," Novak said, "effective immediately. Surrender your badge." "Fired?" Blaine's face turned purple. "For what?" "For being proactive. For stupidity." Novak snapped. "Give me the badge." Blaine hesitated. For a moment, it looked like he might refuse, but the JAG officer stepped forward, and the two NCIS agents standing by the door shifted their weight. Blaine realized he was alone. With shaking hands, he unpinned the silver shield from his chest. He slammed it onto the chief's desk. "This is a mistake," Blaine spat. "You're ruining a good cop's life over a misunderstanding." "You ruined your own life," Mercer said coldly. "And by the way, Mr. Blaine, since you are no longer a law enforcement officer, you no longer have qualified immunity. Colonel Hayes is suing you personally for defamation and assault. I hope you have good savings." Blaine turned and stormed out of the office, but as he walked through the bullpen, nobody looked at him. His fellow officers, men and women he had worked with, kept their heads down. They knew he was toxic. He walked out the back door alone into a world that had seen his face and knew exactly what he was. But the karma wasn't done yet. As Blaine reached his personal truck in the rear lot, his phone pinged. Then it pinged again. Then it started vibrating continuously. His name had been leaked. The internet had found his Facebook, his Instagram, his LinkedIn. Thousands of comments were pouring in. "Disgrace to the badge. You messed with the wrong Marine." "Stolen Valor accuser becomes the criminal. Irony." He threw his phone onto the passenger seat. He tried to start his truck, but his hands were shaking so badly, he dropped the keys. He slumped over the steering wheel and screamed. Back inside, Chief Novak looked at Commander Mercer. "Is it over?" Mercer closed a briefcase. "The lawsuit is just starting, Chief. I suggest you hire independent counsel. The city attorney is going to throw you under the bus to save the mayor." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "One more thing," she said. "The colonel didn't want to mention this, but I will. That fake ID you mocked. It gets him into the Situation Room. The man you had in a holding cell advises the president on counterterrorism. If he had missed his check-in time, a Delta Force extraction team would have been landing on your roof. You should thank God he is a patient man." She walked out, leaving Novak sitting in the ruins of his career. The drive home from the Oak Haven police station was the longest journey of Lieutenant Colonel Darius Hayes' life. He had flown in C-130s under anti-aircraft fire and navigated convoys through IED-laced roads in Kandahar. But sitting in the passenger seat of his wife's Volvo, watching the suburban mailboxes blur past, he felt a unique kind of exhaustion. It was a bone-deep weariness that had nothing to do with physical exertion and everything to do with the soul-crushing weight of dignity violation. Alara drove in silence, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every few minutes, she would reach over and touch his arm as if checking that he was actually there, that he hadn't dissolved into the ether of the booking system. When they pulled into their driveway, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Darius didn't get out immediately. He stared at his front door, the wreath Alara had made for autumn, the tricycle on the porch. "Darius," Alara whispered, I'm okay, he lied. He opened the door. Inside, the house smelled of pot roast and normalcy. It was jarring. How could the house smell like dinner when he had spent the afternoon in a cage? Daddy. The scream was high-pitched and joyous. Nia came barreling down the hallway in her pajamas. Darius dropped to one knee, ignoring the ache in his stiff joints, and caught her. She slammed into him, burying her face in his neck. "Did you get the bear? Did you get Sergeant Cuddles?" she asked, pulling back to look at him. Darius swallowed the lump in his throat. He looked at the camouflage bear he was clutching in his left hand. The bear that had been seized as evidence, bagged, tagged, and then sheepishly returned by a terrified NCIS agent. "I got him, baby," Darius said, his voice cracking. "Mission accomplished." He handed her the bear. She squealed and ran off to introduce the new recruit to her other toys. Darius watched her go, then slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He put his head in his hands and finally, quietly let the tears come. Not from sadness, but from rage. The unraveling of Ronan Blaine. While Darius was being put back together by the quiet love of his family, Officer Ronan Blaine was being dismantled, piece by piece. He had driven to a bar on the outskirts of town, a place where cops usually drank for free. He walked in expecting the usual nods of solidarity. Instead, the bartender, an old friend named Mike, looked at him and turned his back. The news was everywhere. The video of the arrest had been viewed millions of times. But it wasn't just the arrest video. A second video had surfaced. Footage from a bystander showing Blaine mocking Darius's uniform, calling the medals fake. Blaine ordered a whiskey. Mike slammed a glass of water in front of him. "You need to leave, Ronan," Mike said. "What?" Blaine stared at him. "I've been coming here." "Yeah, well, tonight the place is full of guys from the VFW. Mike nodded toward the back booths, and they saw the news. They know what you said about the Navy Cross. If you stay, there's going to be a brawl, and I'm not cleaning up your blood." Blaine looked at the back of the room. 3 men, old enough to be Vietnam vets, were staring at him with cold, dead eyes. Blaine left. He went home to an empty house. His wife, Shelby, wasn't there. Her suitcase was gone. On the kitchen counter was a note scribbled in haste. "My sister's place. Don't come over. The reporters are on the lawn." He turned on the TV. It was a mistake. CNN was running a segment. Pattern of profiling the Oak Haven incident. They weren't just talking about today. They were digging. They had found a lawsuit that the city had settled quietly. The teenager Blaine had roughed up. They were interviewing the kid's mother. Blaine threw the remote at the wall. "I was doing my job," he screamed at the empty room. The conference room in the downtown law firm was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and fear. Darius sat at the head of the table, flanked by Tariq Lang, who had taken personal leave from the Pentagon to act as Darius's lead counsel, and a shark-like civil rights attorney named Rebecca Lewis. Opposite them sat Ronan Blaine. He looked hollow. He had lost weight. His suit was cheap and ill-fitting. The city attorney sat next to him, but looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Mr. Blaine," Rebecca Lewis began, clicking a pen. "Let's revisit the moment you decided to initiate the stop. You stated in your police report that Colonel Hayes was loitering. Define loitering for me." "He was standing around," Blaine mumbled. "He was looking at a window." "He was looking at a window," Lewis corrected. "We have the time-stamped security footage. Is looking at a window a crime in Oak Haven?" "No, but his demeanor." "His demeanor?" Lewis raised an eyebrow. "Was he aggressive?" "He looked hard, like he was looking for trouble." Darius leaned forward. He spoke for the first time. I was looking for a reflection to check my ribbon rack, Mr. Blaine. Because unlike you, I take pride in my uniform. Objection, the city attorney said weakly. Mr. Blaine? Tariq Lang took over, sliding a piece of paper across the table. Do you recognize this? Blaine squinted. It's a transcript. It's a transcript of your radio chatter from the day of the arrest. Lang said, specifically a comment you made to your dispatcher before you approached Colonel Hayes. You said, and I quote, "Looks like another affirmative action hire playing dress up." The room went deathly silent. Blaine's face turned the color of ash. That was just locker room talk. Blaine stammered. That, Lang said, his voice like a guillotine blade, is evidence of premeditated racial bias and malicious intent. You didn't stop him because he was shoplifting. You stopped him because you couldn't stand the idea of a black man outranking you. I served, Blaine shouted, slamming his hand on the table. My brother served. I respect the military. We looked into your brother, Darius said softly. Blaine froze. Private First Class Declan Blaine, Fort Hood, administrative discharge for a knee injury. He was a supply clerk. He was a good Marine. His commanding officer wrote a letter of recommendation for him when he left. Said he was humble. Said he was kind. Darius stared into Blaine's eyes. I wonder what Declan would think of you using his name to terrorize a father buying a teddy bear. Blaine's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. The city attorney closed his folder. We're done here, the city attorney said. Counsel, can we speak in the hallway? We're ready to discuss settlement figures. The federal courthouse was packed. It wasn't a trial. The city had capitulated long before it got to a jury. But it was a fairness hearing to approve the settlement and the consent decree. Chief Novak was gone, forced into early retirement. Half the department had been purged. The new interim chief was an external hire from Atlanta, a woman with a reputation for cleaning house. Darius stood before the judge. He looked impeccable in his dress blues. The narrative had shifted completely. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a symbol. Colonel Hayes, Judge Oris Thorne said, looking over her glasses. The city of Oak Haven has agreed to a settlement of $2.5 million for damages, defamation, and emotional distress. They have also agreed to a Department of Justice oversight period. Thank you, Your Honor, Darius said. This is a significant sum, the judge noted. I trust it brings you some measure of peace. Money doesn't buy peace, Your Honor, Darius said, his voice projecting to the back of the room. But it can buy a shield for the next person. He turned to the gallery. I am announcing today that I am declining the personal use of these funds. A murmur rippled through the press section. I'm establishing the Nia Hayes Legal Defense Initiative, Darius continued. Every cent of this settlement will go toward providing top-tier legal representation for veterans and minorities who are wrongfully accused by law enforcement in this county. No one should have to be a colonel to get justice. No one should have to know a general to get a phone call. The applause started slowly, then swelled into a roar. Even the judge nodded in respect. But the real drama happened outside. As Darius walked down the courthouse steps, shielding his eyes from the flash bulbs, he saw a solitary figure sitting on a concrete bench near the fountain. It was Blaine. He looked like a ghost of his former self. He was wearing jeans and a faded hoodie. He was holding a cardboard box, the contents of his locker, or perhaps his life. Alara touched Darius's arm. You don't have to talk to him. Yes, Darius said. I do. He walked over. The reporters sensed the moment and fell silent, their cameras zooming in. Blaine looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. You got everything? He rasped. My job, my pension, My house, my wife. Are you happy? Darius looked down at him. He didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel joy. He just felt a profound, heavy pity. I didn't take those things from you, Ronan, Darius said. You threw them away the moment you decided your ego was more important than your oath. I made a mistake, Blaine whispered. One mistake. No, Darius corrected him. You made a choice. You made it when you saw me. You made it when you ignored my ID. You made it when you laughed at me. And you made it every day before that, when you treated people like enemies instead of citizens. Darius reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small challenge coin. It was the unit coin for the battalion he commanded. On the back it said, honor, courage, commitment. He placed the coin on the bench next to Blaine. What is this? Blaine asked. A reminder, Darius said. If you ever decide to be the man your brother was, keep it. If not, toss it in the fountain. It's up to you. Darius turned and walked away. He didn't look back to see what Blaine did with the coin. It didn't matter. The video ends with a montage. We see the Oak Haven Police Department undergoing retraining. We see the sign for the Nia Hayes Legal Defense Initiative going up on a brick building downtown. We see Darius, not in uniform, but in a t-shirt, grilling in his backyard. The sun is shining. Clara is laughing, holding a glass of lemonade. Nia is running through the sprinklers, clutching Sergeant Cuddles, which is now a little worn and dirty from love. The camera zooms in on Darius's face. He looks at peace. He looks at the camera one last time, breaking the fourth wall. Karma isn't just about bad things happening to bad people, his voiceover says. It's about the truth coming to light. It's about the world correcting itself. I was just a Marine buying a bear. He was a man looking for a fight. We both got what we were looking for. The screen fades to black, leaving only the sound of a child's laughter and the distant, reassuring note of a bugle playing taps. Not for a death, but for the end of an era of silence. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how the arrogance of one man collided with the quiet strength of another, and how the system was forced to bow before the truth. Officer Blaine thought he was the predator, but he forgot that in the wild, the lion doesn't need to roar to let you know he's dangerous. He just needs to be awake. Now it's your turn. Smash that like button if you think justice was served. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we have more incredible stories of instant karma coming your way. Share this video with a friend who needs to see a bully get taken down. Thanks for watching.